What's going on, guys? I got a freshly shaved face and a clean mustache, and today we're going to be breaking down mobility and flexibility and how this has a direct correlation to strength training, Olympic lifting, and mastering better positioning. So be sure to stick around for the full video because we're going to be covering all the different things about mobility and flexibility to help you optimize and get peak performance out of your workouts. This video is sponsored by this guy right here, K Squared Fitness. I'm Kevin, owner of K Squared Fitness, and we've got a ton of sweet training programs, whether you're trying to get better at the sport of CrossFit, or if you're just a weekend warrior and you train out of your garage and you want to get extremely fit. If you're someone who's prioritizing mobility and flexibility, that already tells me a lot about you, that you want to optimize your workouts, or you're tired of getting hurt and you're looking for a solution to help you clean up your form, clean up your movements. So be sure to like this video and subscribe because we put out free content all the time. In fact, we've got a full mobility course where we guide you through a 15-minute to 20-minute virtual mobility class every single day. So if you're someone that just wants to be told what to do, you can click play, follow along. We address every joint in the body, but we'll talk more on that in a little bit later. But today I want to break down the different topics we're going to be covering. We're going to go over the role of mobility and flexibility, understanding the difference between mobility and flexibility. I'm going to give you guys some mobility drills to address for your shoulders, for your hips, for your back, for your ankles. We'll go through different joints of the body. We're going to go over some mobility techniques to enhance your performance and different styles of stretching, static stretching, dynamic stretching, FRC, PNF stretching, lots of different variations. What I have found to be the most effective and what's actually helped me get a lot stronger just by improving my positioning and stability. We're also going to talk about how you can piece together a mobility routine, when it's best to do it, before your workout, during your workout, at night, all the different things that I've experimented with, and also how to overcome some of the mobility restrictions that you might have. Like if you can't get into a strong overhead position, or if you can't get into a deep squat or an overhead squat. We're going to go over how to attack each mobility component of each particular movement pattern. Now, of course, I can't cover them all, but I'm going to give you a general idea of how you can attack this so that you can improve your mobility. So if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button because we're going to be diving into some stuff, and let's get straight into it. I want to share a quick story with you. And I played basketball for, I think, 15 years, from the time I was in junior high to the time I was 25. Played in high school, played in college, and played in the ABA, which is a developmental team. It's basically the minor leagues. And what I'm saying with that is, since I played basketball, I honestly hardly ever stretched. I had a really difficult time overcoming the different mobility restrictions that I had. I had locked up ankles from basketball. I had an extremely tight back because I'm always in this forward-leaning athletic position. And I had terrible shoulder mobility because everything that I did was going this way instead of like in a snatch we're trying to get back. So I've had a really challenging time retraining my mobility patterns, and I've experimented with so many different things. ROM WOD, pliability, Go WOD, Ready State, Kelly Starrett, all these different mobility protocols that we're all familiar with, doing yoga and stretching, So today I'm going to save you a ton of time and a ton of research to just show you what has actually worked for me to be able to get into a better position, because I know how frustrating it is when I would show up to snatch on Mondays or Tuesday. It's almost like every single week when I would get into this new game of trying to get better at CrossFit. I was pretty fit and had a good cardio, I had good engine and good at gymnastics, but when it came to these complicated Olympic lifts, I was so frustrated because I couldn't get into a good position. And not only does training a good position carry over to good Olympic lifts, but it also helps to reduce injuries because you can get into a better position. So what's the difference in mobility and flexibility? I want you to think about flexibility like your traditional yoga or holding a static stretch. If we're getting into a position where we're going to hold for 2 minutes, you're going to get a position of restriction, you're going to breathe, and you're going to let your air out. You're going to try to get a little bit deeper. Take a deep breath in. You're going to get a little bit deeper. That is a form of static stretching where you are lengthening the muscles. And then mobility training is mobility Now we're actually focusing on what the joints can do. So if mobility is stretching out your muscles, what is the demand of your shoulder joint to get into a proper position? So I like to think about that. Muscles and joints is the difference between mobility and flexibility. And the mobility of your joints is what is often underlooked on actual mobility training, because for years I just stretched. I stretched and stretched and stretched and would think that I would get into a better position. Over the years I would stretch and then I would load the position. So I'd get into a couch stretch to loosen my hip flexors. Then I would get into a squat pattern to kind of retrain the proper mechanics after I've loosened up the muscles that I'm supposed to. And I think that was helpful. And then later on, I've come to learn about actually how to strengthen that in range of motion and then load the pattern. A ton of misconceptions on when you should actually stretch before you get into a workout. And let's break that down real quick. So static stretching, that's when you are holding a position for 2 minutes. This has been shown that it will decrease the amount of power and force that you are going to do. A better form of that would be to do that after your workout, when you're trying to get into that parasympathetic nervous system response, where after a hard and intense and heavy workout, you can just hold a stretch for 2 minutes and you can focus on your breathing and you can relax. Before your workout, you're trying to get revved up. You're trying to get your nervous system ready to get into that fight or flight, trying to get some adrenaline released. So you want to do things like pails and rails, and you're trying to activate your in range of motion, or dynamic stretching, things that are going to get into a position and then quickly come out of it. So 3 to 5 seconds. So let's do a little protocol on what you were to do if you have squats on the agenda. So first thing you can do is spend a little bit of time, maybe just 1 minute, of some foam rolling. Foam rolling doesn't actually break up the muscle tissue, but it can send a body to you, or a signal to your brain saying to relax this muscle. Now, we don't want to relax it for too long, because remember, we're not trying to get into that relaxed state. But foam rolling acts as a way to, hey, loosen up this tissue a little bit, because what happens after that is what you're trying to work on. So then you can get into a couch stretch for 60 seconds. So we loosened up the muscle tissue. Now we're going to lengthen it with the couch stretch. And then here's how we can begin to strengthen that in range of motion. Now, ideally, you're doing targeted mobility work for whatever your mobility restriction is. Maybe it's X, maybe it's Y, maybe it's Z. This could be your ankle. This could be your hip. It could be, your ability to open up your hips. This could be hip extension. So you want to find out by testing to see, when you do a mobility drill, does it actually improve the position of restriction that you're trying to improve? Just using a very generic example here, we went foam roll, we went couch stretch, and then we can get into some pails and rails series. Pails and rails, I've got a link to an article that you can read down below on exactly what that is. But essentially, it's going to be, after lengthening the tissue, we're going to contract for 5 seconds, and then we're going to rail, we're going to regress that position, and we're going to try to squeeze an isometric hold of that in range position. Then after that, you can go to load the new range of motion with some tempo. Maybe you get 5 reps with 3 seconds down, hold that position, and you're trying to communicate to your brain that, hey, this is the new range of motion that I have. Let's use this, and this is the pattern that I want to have in the future. Now, if we look at an overhead movement, we need to address, are we looking at T-spine extension? Do we need to improve flexion? Do we need to improve internal or external in the shoulder? Abduction, adduction, all these different things, right? So it's hard to give a general protocol of what to follow. That's what we do in our mobility classes, where we go through every joint of the body to help address extension, flexion, internal, external rotation. So in those mobility classes I was talking about, we take you through a daily 20-minute class, or every day we work through different joint angles, and throughout the program we'll constantly address every joint angle so you can have improved mobility. But to give you an example, we'll go overhead. So we can foam roll. We can choose some type of We broke down the tissue. Then we're going to get into a stretch. So we might go PVC lat stretch to loosen up the lats. Lats are oftentimes a big limiter to improving your overhead position. So we can do a 2-minute, 1 to 2 minute PVC lat stretch there. Then after that, we can work on some shoulder flexion to improve that position. So again, you want to lengthen and then you want to strengthen the in range. So we could do some flexion hovers or maybe some overhead carries or some holds. And the purpose of that is you want to loosen it, you want to stretch it, and you want to strengthen it. So that's a great combination to start to get some load in the new range of motion that you've established and get strong there. Let's talk about what you can do for a deadlift day or whenever you are hinging. You know, in strength training, we're talking about squatting, we're talking about hinging, we're talking about pushing and pulling. So we covered pushing with the overhead movement. That can be applied for both pushing and pulling. We talked about squatting mechanics. And if we talk about deadlifts, we know that we need to loosen up our hamstrings and also prevent the body to have any type of rotation. Because whenever you're pulling from the ground, if your body rotates a little bit, that's going to lead to some potential overcompensation on one side, and that's where you can get an injury because of one side's working a little bit harder. So I'm a huge fan of working on anti-rotation drills whenever we're talking about deadlifts. And if you notice, we're not just showing you a ton of stretches to improve your position. We're lengthening out the tissue, yes, but then you're actually focusing on strength and getting strong in that position. Let's talk about how we can improve mobility for hinging patterns. So sure, we can spend a little bit of time on foam rolling the hamstrings. From here, I'd like to go on single leg box hamstring stretch, because we're going to go directly into a 60-second single leg hamstring stretch directly into our pails and rails series, which is going to help to improve hip flexion. So we'll go pails and rails. And improving your hip flexion also is going to be great for strengthening your hip flexors, which will translate to strengthening your core, and also things like L-sits, which are brutal and strong and important for improving your core strength. After that, I'd like to work in either some banded pay-off holds or some suitcase carries or variation to strengthen our obliques. You know, our obliques is what helps to control the ability to not rotate. So if we can get strong obliques and be strong and not rotating, we're going to have a lot better position whenever we go to deadlift. I want to briefly talk about the different types of stretches you may be familiar with. We got static stretching, dynamic stretching, and then we have what I've been referring to as functional range conditioning or pails and rails. Static stretching, we talked about it a second ago, is we're getting into a position of restriction and we're holding that stretch for 1 to 2 minutes, focused on breathing, and we're just camping out. We're just holding the position. Dynamic stretching is we will get into a position for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, back out of it, 3 to 5 seconds, back out of it. And this is actually something that I talk about with athletes all the time, because if somebody feels something in a workout, their first initial reaction is to, hey, let me stretch it, right? And I tell them that during a workout, it is best to do dynamic stretches, because let's say we are sprinting and in between sets, you're like, oh, my hamstring is getting a little bit tight. And if you go to stretch out that hamstring for the full minute while you're resting, your muscle is getting lengthened. And then what are you doing whenever you're working out or whenever you're sprinting? Your muscle is being shortened and lengthened because it's contracting and relaxing, the hamstring is. Now, if you go to lengthen the muscle with static stretching and then you demand it to be shortened, then oftentimes it's going to lock up on you. So that's why it's really important to do dynamic or FRC training before your workout or even during your workout to not lengthen your muscle, because you don't want it to roll up on you because you put it into a lengthened position. Now, as I've discussed, that the pails and rails, the functional in-range conditioning, is by far my favorite mobility protocol, because it incorporates static stretching by lengthening the position of restriction first, so you're getting that 2-minute stretch, but then you're working on in range of motion strength. So if you get to your in range position, pails is like driving your leg into the box for 5 seconds, and then rails is you're lifting your leg up by using your in range strength and lifting your leg off the ground for 5 seconds, and repeating that for a series of 5 to 10 reps. And that's how you get stronger in the in range position. And then when you go to apply it to your actual lifts, your body is used to, and you're communicating to your brain that, hey, this is a safe position. I can get here because I've done this before. And it's actually pretty common whenever you're doing FRC pails and rails to get a cramp whenever you're doing, because that is a direct sign that you are weak in that position, and that is a sign that you are potentially on the way to injury. So getting strong in that in-range position, whether it's your hips, your shoulders, your back, your overhead position, if you can create strength with isometrics, you're going to be a lot stronger and improve both mobility and decrease your chance of injury. Let's talk about how to create your own personal mobility routine. Now, for our athletes, what I like to do is couple the mobility training that we have dedicated for the day correlated with our workout programs, because at K-Square Fitness, we help athletes move better, but also perform better. So we got the virtual mobility classes, but we also have workout programs so they can follow exactly what to do. And where I'm going with that is, if we are having a squat day where it's very squat heavy, need the hips to be open, need to have good upright position, our mobility class that day is going to be tailored to loosening up your hips, stretching out your hips, getting into a good position. Same thing if on Wednesday we're focusing on deadlifts and hinging, our mobility class is going to be dedicated to loosening up hamstrings, back, anti-rotation, a lot of things that we just talked about. So I would encourage you that if you're going to create your own mobility routine, look at your movement pattern for the day, squat, hinge, push, and pull, and have your 15 minutes or so where you're dedicated to different mobility protocols and exercises that's going to help improve the position that you're going to be using for the workout, so as you get into the workout, you feel a lot better. And the reason why our classes are just 15 to 20 minutes each day is because consistency is going to be your best friend. Do I love a good 1-hour yoga class? Yes, I do. But driving to a class and sticking around for an hour, my consistency goes way down because I can't do it as frequent. If you can, that's fantastic. You're going to have the most success with improving your mobility and your flexibility by sticking to a routine that you can follow consistently. So if that's every workout before you start, it's 15 minutes, you do a mobility work, and you get into your workout, and then after workout, you do 5 minutes. Whatever it is for you, it's got to be something you can stick to and make a habit and make it consistent. I talked about some of the things that you should prioritize when trying to get into a mobility protocol. That's a little bit of foam rolling, lengthening your muscle, and then in-range isometrics to improve the strength. And then you can just work on different joint angles. So you would lengthen the muscle and then work on pails and rails to improve different joints. So if you're working on your squat patterns, you can get 4 different exercises where you're focusing on some standing hip curls, some controlled articular rotations where you kind of get the joint to move, and then you can begin to work on maybe some internal or some external strength so you can work on both full range of motion, and then you're addressing internal and external to kind of work every joint angle. And the next time you got into a squat pattern, maybe you worked on flexion and extension. You get the idea. To have better movement quality, you have to address every joint angle. You can't just work on internal strength or external strength. You have to look at internal, external, flexion, extension, adduction, abduction. Look at the whole picture. And I talked about how finding something that you can stick to and be consistent with is going to be your best protocol to be successful. Another thing I want to encourage you to do is you also have to be patient. You have to be obsessed with the journey and the process, because this is not going to be something that you improve overnight. Now, with the protocols that I'm sharing with you, you're going to save a lot of time because you're going to get directly to what works. I had to go through all these different tests and experiments to find what works to actually improve my position to where now I can receive a barbell with no pain in my shoulders and in a way better position. So I'm stronger. I'm having more fun with my workouts because I'm not hurting my shoulders every time. I'm able to get into a better position. But this has been through deliberate practice and consistency, and that's what led to my success. So make sure you stick with it and make it a part of your regular program. If that's 3 days a week and that's what you can do, that's what you need to do. It doesn't need to be all or nothing. It needs to be something that you can stick to consistently. And as I talked about all the different joint angles, the last thing I want to leave you with is you have to do a test and retest model of improving your mobility. So that means you get into a position of restriction. Maybe it's a shoulder press. You follow a mobility protocol. You go through all the different things I shared with you. Then you go back to the barbell and you do the exact same movement and you see, does this feel better? Am I in a better position? Okay, these things worked. And you have to experiment with what works and what doesn't, because if you're just shooting for the stars, you have so many things that are going on and you don't know what's working. You want to test and then retest to see if it works. And you do that with all the different movement patterns. Now, if you want to save time on addressing and on how to find out what limitations are for you, I'm happy to take a look at your movement patterns within our K2 mobility class. Whenever you sign up for our program, you get direct access to me and the coaches where you can upload a video where I can see your movement patterns. I can see if your ankles are what's prohibiting you. Is it your hips, your overhead mobility? And I can help you address and direct you into the right direction of, hey, here's what you need to be working on, and it'll save you a ton of time. So I got a couple resources for you. Down in the description below, I'm gonna put free stuff first. I've got links to different blogs that I've written on shoulder mobility, T-spine mobility, hip mobility, ankle mobility. If you're someone who wants to support the channel, you can do that by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, reading our blogs. We put out a ton of free content so that we can help you guys get into better positions and be the best athlete you can. I'll put all that down below. Links to the blogs, or if you're someone who wants to skip the blog, Kevin, just tell me what to do. Down in the description below, I'll also put a link to our mobility class that I've been talking about this video. And your first week is free. So that means you're gonna get 7 free classes. And in those classes, we'll go through every joint angle, just like we talked about. Your hips, your shoulders, your back, your ankle. We address every joint of the body so you can move better. Put that down in the description below. Another way you can support the channel is share us with a friend. If you know that this is gonna be helpful for somebody else, you can tag them. Comment down below if there are other videos that you'd like for us to make. If you have any additional questions, the more feedback you give us, the better we can help you guys. So thanks for checking out today's episode on mobility and flexibility. You guys can check us out on social media as well. You can find us anywhere at K2 Fitness, and we've got a lot of short form content as well. So you can find us on all social platforms. Until next time, keep moving and putting your best foot forward. Remember that effort is a choice. If you want to improve your mobility, you got to put in the work. Catch you in the next one.